Hello, welcome to Homegrown Florida. I am Katrina, and today we are going to be talking about everything you ever wanted to know about seeds. If you are a beginner and you got a seed packet and you don't know what all this information means and how it applies to your garden, hang out with me for a little bit and we're going to walk through every single detail in depth, and hopefully I can answer all your questions about seeding, seeds, varieties, and what all this information means. So I always get the question about where I get my seeds from. Where is the best place to get seeds from? And I have 5 favorites, and I'm going to share those today. This does not mean that there is not really great places to get seeds from. And sometimes I even get them from Amazon, to be honest with you. If it's a variety that I'm just having a really hard time finding and I really want that variety, I'll go anywhere to get my seeds. But there are 5 that I have that are my favorites, and so I wanted to share those with you today. So 2 of them, which you see here, these are local to me. I am in Florida. I'm a Florida subtropical gardener, and Florida is unique. As is, I think, every place. Every place is unique in terms of their climate and their weather, and certain varieties are going to grow better in your area than other areas. So I always encourage you to find a nice local seed producer that you can use for getting your seeds from, because they are going to know exactly what grows well in your area so that you are not constantly fighting against varieties that are really not meant for your weather conditions. So that's why I have 2. The first one is FloridaGardening.com. I love this one, especially for Florida beginners, mainly because they actually give the Florida time frames, whereas normal nationwide seed companies like Burpee, for example, we're going to talk about them in a minute, they tell you timelines on a little map that in no way meet the Florida times. Our Florida times of starting planting are very, very different than what most seed packets and websites are going to tell you. But this FloridaGardening.com tells you exactly when to grow them, and for every single one of their seeds, they have descriptions. They tell you everything you want to know about cucumbers, everything you want to know about watermelons growing in Florida. They also have these packets. I'm not affiliated with any of these. I want to just start with that. But they have these little bundles that you can grow by season. So if you're starting your fall season, they have a fall bundle. And you can buy all the fall seeds. It's an entire pack of, I think it's like somewhere between 15 and 20 different seeds that you can buy as a bundle, which is a cheaper price. I think it comes out to like $1 or $1.25 a packet of seeds. And they are all varieties that grow well in Florida. The germination rates are pretty good. I've seen other places where the germination rates are even better. But if you put 2 seeds down per planting area, you will hit every single time with these guys. I really like them. And if you're new to Florida gardening, they are going to help you get the self-confidence that you need, because all their stuff grows. All their stuff grows, and it does pretty well. Definitely recommend them. The other one that I really like, and this is going to be an interesting looking seed packet. So these guys, this is the Urban Harvest. I love Elise in the Urban Harvest. She has great seeds. There's not a huge variety like you would find with Burpee or Johnny Seeds or Baker's Creek or something like that, but they are Florida specific. She grows them all herself in her local garden in St. Pete, Florida. And then the coolest part, which I absolutely love and really helped me explore varieties, is her seed club. I cannot just speak more highly about her seed club. And this is actually something from her seed club. You get these little cards, and the cards explain it, and she does a video. It's really great. She sends out seeds to you. It used to be every month. I think she's doing it now every quarter. So she sends you a bunch of seeds every quarter, which is basically the start of every season here in Florida. And they're all varieties that grow in Florida. There's a lot of really exotic things that you have never heard of before that she's going to send you, you're going to grow and try this whole new world of vegetables that was off limits to us before because they're not available in a grocery store. It's not just like you have green beans in the grocery store that are providers, or I think they're called provider beans, and then you're going to grow a different kind of bean. You're going to grow something called like roselle. Roselle is a Florida cranberry, and it's actually not a cranberry. It's not a berry. It is the base of the flower. So when the flower comes out and then you have a base, you eat the base of the flower. Totally weird, totally different, tastes just like cranberries. Grows so easy. Needs no fertilizer, doesn't care about heat, loves, our sandy soil. I mean, she is getting you into this stuff that naturally grows here that you will be successful at in a Florida environment. And she does it in a seed club, which I think is so fun. It's like getting a present every quarter of all these cool seeds and all these directions of how to use them. And all of her seeds, which I think are pretty cool. It's the same with most of the ones I'm going to talk about. I think Burpee and Johnny seeds are the only ones that don't do this, but all of them are like heirloom, open pollinated type ones, which means you can save the seeds. So whatever crop that you are growing and producing, you will be able to let it go to seed and save those seeds so that you don't have to continually buy them over and over again. So love Elise with the Urban Harvest. If you get a chance to get on her seed club, definitely do that. Now the next one I love is what I would say is probably for more of your intermediate gardeners. You've had a couple seasons under your belt. You've been successful with growing some plants that were, varieties that do really well in your area. And now you want to branch out and try some different things. M.I. Gardener is the place. I love M.I. Gardener. His germination rates on his seeds are by far the best germination rates. It is almost 100% of everything I've ever gotten from them has germinated. I have failed or never have seen one that didn't work out for me. So his is great. Now, his varieties, which he has a lot of really cool, rare varieties that you're not going to see in a lot of places. Now, this is a moneymaker tomato. This isn't like a super rare variety, but it is a variety that grows very well here in Florida. The only thing I wish was that his website helped, had more filtering in it in terms of the types of climate that these particular type of seeds like to grow in. Normally what I have to do is when I'm looking for a rare variety from him, I'm going to have to do a lot of research on his site as well as research off his site to see if it is friendly for my climate. Might be a Florida thing. If you're north of me, you probably can grow lots of his stuff with no issue. But I have found a lot of tropicals that he grows that may not grow up north. So you got to be careful when you're getting an M.I. Gardener that you really pay attention to how long, the plant grows, what kind of conditions it likes, so that you know whether that kind of fits into your climate or not. But kind of rare seeds, very cool. All of them are heirlooms so that you can save your own seeds. Super cheap. They're $2 a packet, and if you buy, I think it's $12 or $15 worth of seeds from them, the shipping is free. He does these grab bags, I think either once or twice a year, where if you pay a flat fee, he's going to send you like a bag full of seeds that are about to go bad. The date on them is to go bad. It always happens towards the end of the year. Seeds don't go bad in a year. I mean, there's a few. Onions, carrots, they really decline in germination rates after a year, but most other seeds, they will hold up for quite a few years. But his grab bags are really cool because you get a bunch of seeds. You don't get to pick them, but it's all a surprise, and I'm really into those surprise grab bag things. But besides that, they are a small family-owned business in Michigan, I believe. I really like supporting them. I love what he stands for as a business owner, as an entrepreneur who wanted to encourage people to grow their own food, and he wanted to make it easy for them. He has a YouTube channel. and he describes everything that he grows and teaches you how to do it, and he's fun and he's entertaining to watch. I love Luke with MI Gardener to watch him, but his seeds are superb. I cannot say enough about them. Next up would be my next favorite, which is Johnny Seed. Johnny Seed is got a significant amount of varieties. I mean, they have a lot. They're not all heirloom. They do have hybrids, so you can't always save the seeds from a Johnny Seed packet from the results of it. So that's something to consider. They, just like MI Gardener, are not really great at telling you whether it's going to work in your climate or not. Now, if you get their seed catalog, which they will send it to you if you go online and request it, you can either get it in an electronic copy or you can have it mailed to your house. They do have little icons underneath that say whether it is cold hardy or warm hardy, or whether it likes a hotter climate, or whether it's an early maturing or a late maturing, and all of that will feed into whether it's a good candidate for your climate. I almost always get early varieties because you would think that we have like a long growing season here in Florida, and we do. We grow all year round, but our seasons for growing something like, this is lettuce, but let's talk tomatoes, right? Our seasons for growing tomatoes is spring and fall, but not summer and not winter. So I always go for early varieties because they will be able to produce fast enough before I get into the heat of summer, or before they freeze from a frost during winter. So we really have like this 3-month period in spring and a 3-month period in fall to grow our tomatoes. And that goes along with cucumbers, corn, squash, winter squash, all of that. You have a very short period of time to grow them here. But other things, like sweet potatoes, grow all summer long. They love the heat. They'll grow forever. And then lettuce, they'll grow all fall, winter, and spring. So in some ways we do have a season that allows us to grow long periods of time, and in other ways we don't. So Johnny Seeds kind of tells you that a little bit. You have to understand your climate. So this is more of like an intermediate gardener person that would want to get these. I hear Baker's Creek is another really good one that I kind of lump into the same grouping as Johnny Seeds. Johnny Seeds does appeal or direct more towards an actual farm. Whether that's a market farm, a small family farm, they are really meant for farm people rather than, backyard gardeners. But they do sell seeds in smaller packets, like this one, for example. This is lettuce. There's 500 seeds. Am I ever going to make 500 lettuce plants? I don't know. Maybe over the course of 5 years. Probably not. But this is the smallest volume you can get from them. But you can get very large volumes from them too. So if you have a very large garden, I think they are really the way to go, because some of the other ones I've showed you have smaller counts of seeds. And last but not least, I cannot talk about seeds without talking about Burpee. The cool thing about Burpee is that I think I'm pronouncing it right, Burpee? Whatever. The cool thing about Burpee is that you can find them anywhere. I mean, you can find them in Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, Dollar Store. I mean, they sell these things everywhere. You can buy them online. They have a website where you can buy Burpee seeds online at a good price. This guy right here, he's $1.99. They sell organic, they sell heirloom, they sell hybrid, they sell all different kinds of seeds. Now let's talk about the negative about Burpee. Number one, they don't tell you about climate. So you really have to do your own research on what types of varieties are going to work in your climate. Number two, germination rates, not the best. Normally when I'm using a Burpee seed, I will always plant 3 seeds per planting area versus the 1 or 2 that I would use on some of the other ones. Like with MI Gardener, I know it works every single time. I will use 1 seed per planting. With Johnny Seed, where it's a really great germination rate, but sometimes they don't work out, I do 2. Burpee, always 3. Always 3. So it can be a little bit wasteful, but They also produce, this says 600 milligrams of seeds, which is probably like 100 seeds. Once again, I'm not going to use 100 cucumber plants. The fact that they, give you lots of seeds allows you to be able to plant many of them in hopes that the germination of one of them will work. Germination rates, not so great. They make up for it with giving you a ton of seeds so that you can plant a lot. They are so widely available, and that's one of the main reasons why I put them in this video. Is if you're into starting your garden from seed, you have some burpee, whether you're willing to admit it or not. You have some burpee, or you did at one point in time before you were able to find other resources. They're just so convenient to get, and so I have to mention them. The other thing I really like about burpee compared to some of the other ones I showed you is they have a lot of information about the seeds, and it's really good information. So we're going to jump right into that. We're going to talk about two of them today. We're going to talk about MI Gardener and Burpee, because I feel like these two have the most information on them about the seeds, particularly on the back. They have a lot of information that you need to know about starting these seeds. So let's jump right into it. So I'm going to start with Burpee, just because widely known, widely used. Probably more people are going to be getting Burpee than anyone else. And we're going to talk about these. I'll give you some close-ups of the back of these. So the front part's just going to tell you what type of vegetable it is, and it's going to tell you the variety. And a lot of the time it's going to tell you vegetable, herb, or flower, and sometimes you will see, not here because this is not organic, but there would be an organic label as well. So that's basically what you're going to see. You're also going to see a picture of what that plant's going to produce, so you know what you're getting. On the back, you have a couple different areas here. You have this center spot, then you have this right area that explains some things. So in the center, the first thing it's going to talk about is like a description. And that description is also, it's going to tell you about the type of fruit or result that you're going to get from the plant. Like with this bush cucumber, it produces 8 to 12 inches fruit, so you know what size you're looking for when ready to harvest. It also tells you the disease resistance, and not any of my other seed packets tell me this, well, Johnny Seed does. Johnny Seed does tell you the disease resistance of some of these. So this particular one, this bush champion, is a mosaic resistant, disease resistant. So if you have a common disease or a common type bug in your area, it's going to tell you on your seed packet for Burpee, or say for Johnny Seed, if it's resistant or it has a tolerance for some of those things, like root knot nematodes, powdery mildew, downy mildew, bacterial virus. There's a ton of different things, and if your area has common issues with those, it's going to tell you right here in this bolded print right here. The next part it's going to give you is a description of how to plant it. And that planting is going to tell you when to plant it, how many seeds to plant. And like I said, when I do Burpee, I do it based on germination rate, so I always do 3. They're going to tell you, anywhere from 1, 2, 3, or whatever. It's going to talk to you about spacing, how much space you should have in between the 2 plants, or if you're going to have multiple plants, should you have 6 inches of space, 12 inches of space, 36 inches of space? It's going to tell you that here in the description. It's going to tell you how deep you should plant the seed. There's a little trick, little hint, helpful information here. You always want to plant your seed as deep as the seed is wide or tall. As big as that seed is how deep it needs to be planted. So those itty bitty tiny lettuce seeds don't need to be planted at any kind of depth. Usually I just poke a little hole, drop the seed in, sprinkle on some soil on top of it, like salt being sprinkled, and that is plenty. But for a cucumber seed, which is usually about that big, it's going to go that deep down into the ground. There's your helpful hint for today. But it's going to tell you specifically how deep you should plant it. And I always go by the measurement of the size of the seed rather than what they say here, just because that has always worked out for me. The other thing that it has here is the germination dates. So how many days it's going to take to germinate. So with this bush champion cucumber, it says that it germinates, or seedlings will emerge in 7 to 14 days. I've had them emerge much sooner than that, and sometimes they take longer depending on how cold your soil is. But they're giving you a general vicinity of about how long you should expect to wait before those seedlings emerge from the ground. Now down here at the bottom, they have this map. And the map is of the United States with different color coding. And the color codings correspond to their little legend down here that talks about when you should be planting. So these are planting times. For most of the country, this works out great. For us in southern states, not so much. So just know that if you are going to take this into account, if you're in a southern state, or maybe even a very northern state where you're outside of that perfect center of the United States, this probably works for the center, doesn't necessarily work for us in the very north or us in the very south. But it kind of gives you an idea of when they're encouraging you to start your seeds. And the timing that I've figured out is all based on frost dates. So they're giving you a date based on your last frost. Almost all seeds are sown either right before your last frost or after your last frost. But some of us who live where it's a frost-free area, like where I live, or it's a very minimal frost area, you grow at different times than what this says. So just take that with a grain of salt. One other thing to think about when you're looking at this map and when it says to start your plantings is it gives a span. So let's say the Florida span says for cucumbers, March to September. It means that you can start the seed planted in the ground or in a tray anywhere from the beginning of March all the way to the end of September. And then the plant will grow throughout that period of time, and you will have time to harvest it after this span, or maybe in the span, depending on how wide that span is and how long it takes for that vegetable to grow. But I always get that question, is it a start and end date? Like it's you start the seed here and it ends in September? No. It means that you can grow any time or start your seed anytime from that March date to that September date. Something to keep in mind. The right side here has a bunch of information, which I think is really good. One, it has the sun requirement, full sun, and then underneath that it says 6+ hours. So full sun in Florida is different than full sun in Michigan. Michigan, it might be 6 hours. Here in Florida, you need to probably knock off 2 to 3 hours. So full sun in Florida is about 4 hours. The next one that it has here is the days to harvest. The days to harvest is telling you the earliest that plant will produce. This is kind of a mixed bag depending on what you're growing. If it's lettuce, for example, it's going to tell you a days to harvest somewhere between 45 and 60 days. But you can actually start harvesting from lettuce after it's got 4 or 5 leaves on it. So technically you could harvest earlier. But with most things, like these cucumbers, it's telling me that after 55 days, I should have my first cucumber ready to harvest. That means the plant has, and this is based off of after it's germinated. So it does not include the 7 to 14 days to germinate. So after the 7 to 14 days to germinate, then your timer starts for the 55 days to harvest. Your plant, the growing process of a plant, which I have learned, is that plants grow from the germination seedling stage pretty quickly. And then they go through this period of time where they don't really feel like they're growing, or they're growing very slowly. And my best guess is that there's a lot happening underneath the ground in terms of root structure and health. And then all of a sudden, you'll be about halfway through your 55 days, and that tiny little plant has now become huge, and it just bursts and it grows really, really fast, and you start seeing flowers popping up, and then you start seeing, pollination occurring, and you have a plant with a piece of fruit on it. Now, this does not mean that you're going to be in the full swing of harvest at 55 days. This just means that your very first piece of fruit will be ready at 55 days. And then it will continue to produce for long past that 55-day mark. So keep that in mind, that when you are thinking about growing these and you know that maybe you're headed into winter, if you just count 55 days, you're just going to get a few pieces of fruit. But make sure you have maybe, half the amount of time of the days to harvest. So with this one, say 55 days is how long it's going to take. Add another 50% onto that to get the full harvest. So add another 25 days to be able to harvest everything that plant will probably be able to produce. And you'll probably be in a good spot there. So make sure to think about that when you're thinking about backing into your winter dates. The next part here is the planting depth, like we talked about before in the description. They kind of reiterated over here. It says 1 inch. These seeds are not 1 inch. I think 1 inch is a little deep for a cucumber seed, especially a small cucumber seed like these guys are. Once again, always use the size of the seed is how far it needs to go down. It has been a winner for me in my garden, so definitely take that away. And then it talks about thinning. So most plants you thin to a certain spacing. So you only want one plant every 3 to 6 inches depending on the plant. With cucumbers though, they want you to put them in groups. So they say sow, which means direct seed, 4 to 6 seeds about 3 feet apart in hills. So you got a hill and you plant 4 to 6 of the seeds, and then 3 feet away you have another hill where you do 4 to 6 seeds. Then what they're telling you over here to the right is thin them down to 2 or 3. So once your 4 to 6 have sprouted, what they're telling you is bring this down to 2 or 3 of those seedlings. So you're gonna have to kill off some of your seedlings, which is what we call thinning, because they need space for their roots. And what they're saying is per hill, you want to end up with 2 or 3 plants on that hill. Now the hilling thing only happens with like watermelons, squash, and cucumbers. Most of your other plants are going to say something like sow 2 seeds 4 inches apart and then thin down to 1. That's usually what you're going to see on this side. Lettuce, kale, tomatoes, peppers, pretty much all the other vegetables other than the ones that I mentioned earlier. The next thing that the Burpee does, which I think is really cool, is it talks about container-friendly gardening. I thought this was really smart of them because there's a lot of people that grow in containers, and this is really helpful. I've seen this in no other seed packet. But this one basically says, and you're not doing the hilling method, you're not doing a hill 3 feet apart with 4 to 6 seedlings. They're saying what you want is 1 plant per 12-inch container. So a 12-inch container across, so a 1 foot size container, you want 1 plant in that container. I thought that was really cool. I think that was a good move on behalf of Burpee to really include those container gardeners, because there's a lot of us out there. I do raised bed, I do in ground, but I have my green stalks, and my green stalks are containers, and I also do some pots. There is a time and place for them, and a great time and place for them are if you live in a house or an apartment or a condo and you don't have the ability to grow in ground because it's not your ground, or maybe you're going to be moving. When I moved up here, I planted everything in containers because I knew I was going to be moving and I didn't want to miss a season, so I grew in containers. I still grow in containers to this day sometimes, depending on what I'm growing. But I thought it was really smart of them to add this. So definitely take a look at that. It's good. And then the last thing I want to point out is down here at the bottom. It has a printed out packed for date, and it's a year. So it says packed for 2022. That means that these seeds were packed to be used in the year 2022. And why that's important is seeds start to lose their germination abilities after about a year. Almost all seeds. But the rate at which they deteriorate is different per seed. I have found that the bigger the seed is, the longer it can live, or the longer it takes for it to deteriorate past that germination date or that germination rate. So cucumbers, I've had cucumber seeds last like 5 to 6 years. The only thing that happens is that your germination rates get worse and worse. So instead of putting, say for burpee, I put 3 cucumber seeds down to see how many come up. I might have to put 4 or 5 down to see how many come up if the seed packet is from like 5 years ago. Now, other plants like carrots and onions, they really deteriorate badly after 1 year. And the way that I combat that, little helpful hint here, is I soak those seeds. If it's a tiny seed, I soak those seeds in water for 24 hours, and that does help their germination rates. So something to consider there. If you're going to be using carrot seedlings that are 3 years old, you're really pushing it. And if you're really going to push it, add the extra step to soak those seeds in water for 24 hours before you put them down. And I've had success with being able to grow older seeds that way. So that packed by date is important. Now, like I said, you can grow seeds past the date that's on here. This is always 1 year. M.I. Gardner is really cool. He actually resurrected a tomato. I can't remember the name of the tomato. Crimson something. But it was like a 30-year-old tomato seed that has not been grown again. Like nobody grows it anymore. And so he took 30-year-old seeds. He only had a few of them. He soaked them. He planted them all. He was able to get one of the plants to germinate and produce. And so he went through a lot, and you can watch his videos because they're very interesting about how he went through that process of resurrecting that seed and getting it to grow. And now he has completely repopulated that seed that 30 years ago has been, I guess, extinct. I guess that's the only way to call it. That type of tomato has been extinct for 30 years. And M.I. Gardner germinated a seed, which was an effort. Don't get me wrong, it was not a smooth sailing for him. It was a difficult, painstaking, loving process that took him years to do, because even though you get one plant to germinate, you have to isolate that plant. You have to make sure that the seed that you get from that plant is healthy and that the plant is healthy. So he went through a lot, and then you have to produce lots of seeds for other people to be able to grow them. It took him years to do it, but he actually did it, and I find that so cool. So let's talk about M.I. Gardner. That's a great little segue into M.I. Gardner. I love his seed packets. They don't have all the information like Burpee has, but they do have good information, especially good information that hints towards climates, which is very important to me in Florida, where my climate is, a deciding factor of whether I grow something. So let's go over his seed packet. We're probably going to go through this one a little bit quicker than the Burpee because there is some things on here that are repetitive. So I won't say them again. So the front has the same thing, right? Name, variety, the amount of seeds. It says whether it's an annual or a perennial. I like that. So that way you know. Beginner gardeners, I love you guys, but your plant is not going to live forever. And I know that that's always something that like they're always like, oh my gosh, what's happening to my plant? Well, after it produces, it dies. And so that is common, and that is normal. That is normal. And the way that you know whether you've got one that's going to do that is if it says annual right there. Otherwise, if it says perennial, it should last for multiple seasons. But I like that they put that up there. Now let's flip to the back. The thing that I really like about M.I. Gardner with his tomato seeds, because this is a moneymaker tomato, is along the side here he says whether they're indeterminate or determinate, and it's very obvious. Burpee does it, Johnny Seed does it, lots of them do it, but it's not very obvious. His is obvious. It's right down here. It says IN indeterminate. And an indeterminate tomato means that it will continuously grow. The plant never actually stops growing. It can get like 10, 15 feet tall. James Pigorani, he's another YouTuber. He grows tomato trees using indeterminate tomatoes because they will continuously grow higher, higher, higher. And an indeterminate tells you that, whereas a determinate tomato is going to put in this big bushy plant, produce all of its tomatoes, then it dies. Where an indeterminate will grow upwards and keep producing these flushes of tomatoes, whereas a determinate produces one big flush. And that's important to know. If you're eating it for fresh eating, indeterminate is your way to go. If you're using it to make things like spaghetti sauce, ketchup, salsa, you probably want more of a determinate tomato. Another thing to think about is your climate. Do you want a bunch to come in right at that days to harvest mark, or do you have a longer season where the tomatoes can come in over a longer period of time? All of that is important to know when you're picking whether you're going to use indeterminate or determinate tomatoes. The other thing it has over here on this side is the planting depth, which we talked about, although I think his planting depth is actually a little bit more accurate than like Burpee. And then the full sun requirement. It doesn't say the number of hours, it just says full sun. The description here gives you a lot of hint about climates. So let me read this one to you. Indeterminate, this English garden kitchen favorite, is a must-have for lovers of traditional tomato flavor. Known for its versatility, this variety loves hot, humid weather and grows well in greenhouses. The color and flesh are a deep crimson and are full of amazing acidic flavor. So it tells you a lot about the fruit that you're going to get. But the thing that I love that he does in his descriptions is he gives you a little hint about where they like to grow. And the reason why I got this one is it stood out to me that he said they love hot and humid weather. That's where I live. I live hot and humid. Now, he also has northern stuff. So he will say something like very cold hardy, resists bolting in cold temperatures, or day length. He really gives you kind of a hint to the climate. He doesn't outright say this is going to go well in Florida or this is going to grow well in Michigan. But he does say the type of climate that they prefer, which I like. But you do have to read all the descriptions to find that out. But that's okay. The next thing he has is when to start them. His is kind of cool. He tells you whether to start them outdoors or indoors and how long before or after your first frost. I do like that part because for our northern friends, I know you guys have to start a lot of your plants indoors. And so he really hones in on that as to whether you should be starting these indoors or whether you should wait until your soil reaches a certain temperature. So that's cool. He also has the days to germinate on here, but he adds, which I like, because once again, climate guys, climate is so important. He adds the temperature that they will germinate at, the ideal temperature. So these tomatoes, the ideal soil temperature, and this is soil temperature, to germinate is 70 to 90 degrees. 90 is really high. That is their ideal temperature to germinate. And we mimic this in some ways by using like heating trays inside the house. But here in Florida, our soil stays right at 70 degrees most of the time. On a rare occasion, it drops into the 60s. The one thing I would say is if you don't have a temperature gauge to test the soil temperature, an easy way to figure out your soil temperature is you can go online, because there are people that are giving off soil temperatures in your vicinity. It won't be perfect to your particular garden, but your vicinity. And then the other way is to look at the temperature that it says that it is outside on your weather apps. When weather measures temperature, it measures it, I think it's like 3 to 6 feet up off the ground. I can safely assume that if you go lower, 3 to 6 feet in the air temperature, if you go lower down to the ground, it's going to be cooler. If it is 40 degrees outside, your soil is going to be colder. It is not going to be in a good temperature range to plant tomatoes. And that's what it's basically telling you here. I like that he puts that in there. Next up, he has days to maturity, which is basically the same thing as days to harvest. He has the plant spacing, and he has the fruit size, which is a little bit different. You usually see this in the descriptions of some of the other ones. He says that these fruit are 4 to 6 ounces. So each tomato on here is a 4 to 6 ounce tomato. That tells you that these are not beefsteak, but they're also not cherries. So they kind of look like cherries in the picture, but they're more like a vine ripe tomato size is what you're getting, or a little bit smaller than a vine ripe tomato. And then the very bottom, he talks about harvest information. Now, I have noticed with his seed packets that the description part and the bottom thing right here, specifically this bottom one, varies greatly from plant to plant, or from seed to seed. It's usually like a tips and tricks is what you get in this little green box. And for the tomato one, he is describing to wait for, the color change, how to know based on pressing the tomato if it is ready to be harvested, the weight and size of the tomato. He's giving you helpful hints of when to harvest these. Now, if you had lettuce on here, he would have something totally different written here. It might not even be harvest information. It might be, information about the best way to seed your lettuce in high intensity versus direct seeding versus transplant. It's kind of like a tips and tricks section, which I think is pretty neat, especially for a beginner gardener. It gives you a little bit more knowledge than some of the other ones do, because the other ones don't really jump into those tips and tricks. But that's what that green box typically has, is those tips and tricks. And then, of course, down at the bottom, he also has a packed date. I believe all seeds require a packed date so that you know what year. Now, I have bought seeds that don't have a packed date, which causes me concern or I don't know how old those seeds are. And usually those are like my Amazon seeds. When I buy something from Amazon, which I don't really do that often, but on the rare occasion that I cannot find the variety that I'm looking for anywhere else, I will buy them on Amazon. And a lot of the times they don't have a packed by date. And I don't know why that is, but they don't have that packed by date. And so I always err on the side of soaking the seeds and putting down multiples, 3, 4 seeds, to see how well they germinate. So that is how you read a seed packet and what all that information on a seed packet means. I hope this was helpful. Head down into the comments if you have any questions whatsoever. If you see something on a seed packet and you don't know what it is, head down in the comments. I will respond to you and give you an explanation of any questions that you might have. Thanks so much for watching.